The Marathon Man, Joe Gagnon.
Oh, wow. It's sort of hard to believe. I look at that and I'm like, did I really do that? I actually have almost no real connection when you do these sort of extraordinary things. They happen at a moment in time. So actually, thanks to a lot of the people in the audience who actually helped me around the world. It was a remarkable experience. And so I'll start off by apologizing, because when you do something like that, you become sort of a believer that anything's possible. And so if we walk through this week with a bunch of excuses as to why it can't happen, you're going to have a hard time talking to me about why it can't happen. I had a lot of people, as I led up to it, tell me all the reasons why it wouldn't work. Flights won't take off. Maybe you'll get too many blisters. You'll get tired, you know. There's 1,000 things that could go wrong. Probably more than that. Many of them I didn't have any control over. And what I kept telling everyone was, why don't I just go and find out? Why don't I go find out? Because that's the only way to know. And so as we walk into this section here and we talk about customer engagement and we talk about the future of work, probably to me the most exciting two topics we could talk about this week, let us not put in the way some barriers and beliefs that got us here today and probably made us very successful, but are not what are going to get us to the next stage. I mean, GE did it. We heard a great story just now. They threw away sort of conventional thinking. And we're going to have to do that because the time is actually one of the most unique in our history. Many of us are probably sort of hoping we'll make it for the next 20 years of our lives. And I hope to see sort of what happens myself, because there's some remarkable things that are happening. Think about this. If you're a millennial, you'll probably have 35 jobs in your lifetime, right? In China, they're going to buy 160,000 robots just this year. 200 billion email messages a day, 100 billion messages on Messenger. 40% of workers in the United States are now contingent. We think over the next 20 years that 46% of jobs in the US will go away, replaced by robotics and by AI. There are just amazing things happening around us. And in that context, we have an opportunity. The future really is here for the taking. The question is, are you going to be the ones who take it, or are you going to let someone else take it from you? If you were in the S&P, or the Fortune 500, excuse me, in 1925, the expected life of a company was 67 years. If you start a company today, it's 10 years. So the expected life of any company starts today is 10 years. Imagine what you might do differently if you thought you were going to be around for 67 versus 10, and it's only accelerating. And in that context, we have to stop thinking the way it used to be. We have built our businesses around what we would call, at least I know this is a global group, but I'll call it, just the American as the example. That typical American doesn't exist anymore. There is no way to model an individual, right? All the societal norms are broken. Everything that was normal is actually no longer. Traditional is not traditional. Everything is changing. And so we hear that over and over again, and it's like, then what are we going to do about it? We have a big responsibility here at Aspect and amongst this crowd. On a daily basis, we touch about 1 million agents with our software. So if we don't think we can have a big impact, why don't we think about how many people that they talk to on a daily basis? We think it's about 100 million consumers around the world. So what you're going to work on over the next 3 days has a massive impact. This isn't just sort of idle thought. This is actually big thinking. How we're going to address the lives of 1 million people who are on one end of the phone or on the end of a text or an SMS, who touch this 1 million consumers every day. What we do actually really matters every day. And we have to think fundamentally about how we're going to change what they do, and that's what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes here. There's this massive opportunity that's sitting in front of us, and it's interesting to think about how this convergence is happening. The convergence is happening differently than most have ever thought about. It's at this intersection point between how you engage with the consumer, how work is executed, and how it operates in your industry. Great example, of course, would be Amazon, right? They're in retail. They decided that instead of hiring people to work in a DC, they would actually hire robots, right? They engage with customers differently. They don't actually hire anyone to open up a 200,000 square foot store. They don't actually have a store. Many of you who run a retail business, you actually have store hours. There is no such thing in the Amazon world, right? We hear it over and over again, but what they have done is fundamentally looked at that intersection point. And it's that intersection point where differentiation can happen. And so as you walk through this week, think about it. If I engage differently with the customer, if I execute the work differently, and I do it in my industry, I have massive opportunity. And why now, right? We have to actually sort of get this through our head, because first and foremost, we're spending billions of dollars on customer service. It's not working. We know this in our hearts every day. Every one of us would tell you 100 reasons why I don't want to stay on the phone for 16 minutes waiting for someone to answer a simple question. I'm in the hotel, I call to ask my air conditioner to be fixed. No one answers the phone. We have 1,000 examples of where we're not getting a return on our investment. Consumers want to be engaged. Why wouldn't you allow people who want to help you to do it? Over and over again, we say no to the customer. We send them emails that say, do not reply. We won't let you text. We won't let you talk on the hours you want. We won't let you do it any way that you can do in your regular life. When will we get over this? The freelance economy is booming. We sort of estimate by the year 2040 that every single one of us will be independents. We will have a shingle, we'll have a signpost, we will have a set of competencies that are hired on a per work basis. Employment as we know it is changing, and as we talk about the generations to come, they will never expect to be an employee. And then lastly, what was it, Stu, $35 billion spent this past year? Like, who can outspend those three guys, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, in building infrastructure? You can't. So why start now? Stop. It's utility. It's utility at almost every layer, up until the relationship layer. I mean, there's actually NLU, we'll talk about in a little while, machine learning that you can license on a per unit basis. You don't even have to build the technology at all. Just pump your data into it and it'll give you insight. It's all utility. What that means is you have to rethink what your role is. Our role used to be to build infrastructure. It'd be the last thing that you would do. We also know that we like things our way. Most of the arguments you might have in your life are because you're trying to convince someone of your opinion. Right? That's what we do in our personal lives. We do it in business. We argue all the time about things that we shouldn't. Like, why would we try to tell someone else how to do it? In fact, we know that customers not only don't want it just one way, they may want it different in the same day. Maybe at one moment they like the butler to actually take care of them, right? Give me high-level service. I want to feel good about it. Maybe in the next moment we want to be texting, right? I want to send a Facebook Messenger message. You hear about it over and over again, or an SMS, whatever it might be. And then lastly, Pepper. You guys know who Pepper is? Pepper, the humanoid, right? The robot that actually feels and knows and understands emotion, can interact with you very much like a human, but isn't. What if we could do all of these and more? What if there's another 5 of these that we don't know about that will exist into the future? Should we legislate how people interact or not? Fast forward. Are we going to go at 2x fast forward? How fast do we have to go? Is 4x fast enough? What if someone's going at 8x? What if it actually is that most of the companies you're going to compete with have 50 employees today, and you have 20,000 or 50,000, and they can provide the same service that you can? If you don't go 8x forward, you're going to have a little bit of trouble. And as I got prepared for this talk, we started thinking about what we're going to do over this next few minutes is talk about what happened in the past 2 years, right? In just 2 years, how much change has happened. So we introduced this idea to you, this idea that says that we have a model today that's heavily dependent on an agent workforce, 1 million of them that we affect. There's probably 12 or 14 million of them around the world, and we rely very little on the customer. And the problem with this is that they're not very well engaged. And on the right side is a new model, this customer engagement model. The foundation is built on your customer, allowing them to serve themselves whenever they want. But here's the work. The project is in the middle. It's in those 2 arrows, understanding how to move the work from the left to the right. This might be one of the most fun projects you could ever work on. I love working on it because you start to really understand customer need and how you should execute. And when you change this, you create a much more stable model. Now, agents or advisors are still really important, but their role changes. We talk about this over and over again, and we'll talk a little bit about iSelect throughout the day. And we'll think about how their role is going to change in terms of giving advice and insight, telling me what to do on the hard problems, the things that I don't want to spend time on. But certainly understanding my balance or simple requests, why should I spend any time on that? 2 years ago, I stood on this stage, we did research, we told you about millennials. They were changing the world. I even sort of said, I was a closet millennial. I loved sort of the mindset, right? Like, I want things my way, I want them now, I want my 14th place trophy, come on, please. But you know what happened? Time went by, it's not just about millennials anymore. The next generation is actually already here. Are you ready for Gen Z? Have you thought about them? Do you understand, even just in the United States, out of 318 million people, there's 73 million of them, the oldest of which are already in the workforce? They come with a very, very different mindset already than millennials. They are the first true digital natives. They do not understand analog. They've never seen it. They don't understand or relate to it. They think a coffee house is the office, right? They're highly independent. They're not actually very cooperative. Sadly, you know what happened was, you know the Gen Xers, remember them? They were stuck between the baby boomers and the millennials. They're actually awfully angry, and they're the ones who created the Gen Z. So you actually start to understand why they are the way they are. Let's talk a little bit about how to interact with them. So I was talking to one of my buddies, and he's hired some of these guys, and he had this 22-year-old, and he's working for him, and he said to him, you know, did you actually go to that customer meeting? And he said, yeah, I had a great customer meeting last Thursday, got all this great information from them. And he said, well, how long did it take to drive to the meeting? He said, what do you mean by drive? He said, oh, no, I mean, you took the train there? He said, no, I didn't drive. I didn't take the train. He said, well, what do you mean? I told you to have an in-person meeting. And he said, I did have an in-person meeting. He said, what are you talking about? He said, I was on Skype. That's an in-person meeting. And the guy kept looking at him. They kept arguing back and forth. And then finally, my friend realized, he said, oh, this is a Gen Z. In-person is video. You don't have to actually shake their hands as we would. And so if that is indeed the way someone's thinking, how would you then orient managing that group? How would you actually orient serving that group? Would you do something very differently? And it's only beginning to happen. 73 million people who are going to affect, at least here, how we think about interaction in a very, very different way just 2 years later. 2015, we put up this slide. We told you that this should be the tenets for customer intimacy. Know me, make it mobile, help me discover. All these great ideas, right? We hope that you've been working on this over the past 2 years. It's not enough. Now we have to think about minimizing customer effort, because that's what really matters to me. I don't want to waste my time. I want you to save me time, right? Best example I've come up with to minimize customer effort, we love talking about Uber, probably ad nauseum, but you know, I realized one day I had like a cup of coffee, I had my backpack, I had all this stuff, I was getting out of the Uber car, I opened the door, and it dawned on me that opening the door is how I pay for the car. Right? I have to open the door to get out of the car. There's no other way to end that ride. But that is actually the form of payment. So in your business, I would challenge you to think about what's your open the car door. How can you go to zero effort? This is on the foundation on the way to building relationships. Think of this, event and life driven, right? So we love iSelect. We've spent 2 years working with them and looking at this life admin store. They have all this insight from the millions of people that they serve on a weekly basis, and they understand what matters to me and when it matters. But how often do we ever tell someone that, maybe when you're in retirement, you should think about a different health plan. Maybe when your kids graduate from college, these are the things you should do. right? We often miss these opportunities because we're so caught up in our life. Someone knows, why wouldn't they use the data to help us? I love Mint.com. I talk about it ad nauseum. I'm sorry, but about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, I had an email from them. Mr. Gagnon, we found 10 1099s and other documents that you would need to be able to file your tax return for you. Here's a link to all those documents. That's awfully personal and very helpful. They actually did something for me as an individual. I was really surprised. I never asked them to do this. But because of the access they have to the data they gave them, they made my life easy. Have it be conversational. Like many in the room, I fly a lot. I have nice status on American Airlines. Every once in a while, I will have landed and I'll get an email or a text from them that says, by the way, don't worry, your next connection is going to be on time. You know, you're settled down, right? That's actually a relationship. You care about me. Always on, we talk about this over and over again. We can actually get packages faster than you can go to the store. I can order it tonight. It can be on my desk in the morning. And then lastly, this idea of advisory. We need to help people more. These are all the things that we would expect to have happen if you were building a relationship for me. If you're going to actually build a relationship, you need to do each of these elements. This is the defense against everyone who's going to come try to compete with you. We have a few quick examples to talk about customers. In one of our sister towns right next to us in Phoenix, Mesa, Arizona, a municipality using SMS to allow local citizens to interact with the government, right? To pay bills, to pay fines, to do anything interactive. They use SMS, right? Very progressive thinking. You have Mercedes, excellence in engineering, now thinking about how you change the experience in interacting with Mercedes by using Messenger or SMS to be able to ask questions, to be able to interact with the service department, to be able to create a new form of relationship, not just based on, the sheet metal and the silicon, but really based on how you feel about that car. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't spend a little bit of time talking about what we've learned over this past year with Radisson. Last year when we were here, we told you about Edward, the virtual host, who's now become sort of an institution within Radisson in the UK. Edward's doing amazingly well, by the way. I know he got the Employee of the Month last year. But now he's integrated, right? Net Promoter Score is up 13 points. People write about Edward on TripAdvisor. You can go find this. 60% of all questions that are asked in the hotel are now asked through Edward. On the weekend, people especially love to play around with Edward. They're like, Edward, do you have a girlfriend? Edward responds, no, I work 24/7 by 365. Who has time for such things? People know that it's a virtual assistant, but they enjoy the banter. They especially enjoy getting a response, right? And they now rely on Edward to do the things that the hotel itself really sometimes doesn't able to deliver on themselves. They also use Edward to now do things like suggest, hey, maybe you'd like to take a massage this afternoon because we have openings at 2 o'clock. Really fun story. I was out meeting with Michael Marini, who's the CIO recently, and we're having breakfast. He said, when you have breakfast included, you get long queues in the morning. So we have Edward sending messages to people the night before. If you'd like to avoid the long line in the restaurant, why don't you come at 7:30 instead of at 8 o'clock? And so Michael said, I happened to be sitting down here at breakfast one morning, and I sat next to this nice couple, and the husband said to the wife, Edward told us to come down early, and there's no one here. I didn't have to come this early. I'm not sure about Edward here. So people actually are listening to what he's saying, right? So it's now part of the way that the whole service experience comes to life. But we would never have known this had we not stepped into it, had we not given it a try. And now Edward is actually essential to the operation of the hotel. I would offer the fun part that you could have is as you get your digital employee on board, figure out what his name or her name should be as well. So customer engagement, it's going to be one of the most fun things you can work on. The tools are there, the infrastructure's there. Every bit of it's ready for you to do something with it. But that isn't really as much of the change that's going to go on, that's going to affect your lives on a daily basis, as it is this idea of the future of work. It's foundational to who we are as people. Work defines us. actually the most productive humans, the happiest humans, the ones who live the longest and the healthiest lives work. It's a really, really important topic. It's one of the topics that's actually being written about by economists, by philosophers, by politicians, by really interesting and smart people around the world. And we're going to have to focus on this in a big way over the next 5 to 10 years, because we are responsible, remember, for not only just the million agents, but everyone else who's connected to that. So let's just take a little bit of a walk along here, because I think this is important to think about where we came from and how we should feel about where we're going. So just as recent as 120, 130 years ago, there was only about 1 billion people on the planet. We were farmers as a global entity. We took care of ourselves. You know, we had a family, our labor was the people in our family, and we were good. We introduced electricity, thanks GE. It created mechanical advantage. It actually gave us the industrial world. It was actually quite fascinating how that happened, and we got 2 or 3x times the productivity of what a farmer could have. We all sort of became dependent on large companies who helped us be employed, and it was fantastic. And then we had the digital world come along. In this digital world, we got probably 4 or 5x, maybe 10x sometimes, depending on how we used it. We started to become digital natives. We lived with these phones in our hands, information at our fingertips. And we're going to soon enter into, if not already there, this sort of next generation. This generation we're starting to call the augmented universe. And the fundamentally big shift here is this no longer going to be a mechanical advantage that we take, because what we're going to be able to do is apply 5, 10, 10,000 brains to a problem. Whatever number n is, will fundamentally change how we live and operate. Because it's not just a digital advantage. Imagine if you could put 10,000 brains on solving a problem. That's what AI is going to do. It's going to affect society. This is what will enable the autonomous driving. It will redefine how cities happen. But most importantly, what will happen is we'll have to rethink how we do work in that context, right? How we contribute to that and how we participate. It's really important because, again, as we said, this is not sort of up for grabs. This is happening. I don't suggest that we have to run urgently into the future. What I suggest is that you have to move with certainty, because underneath us, it's all been happening, and we just haven't noticed, because we run traditional organizations. But as you start to dig deeper, you start to realize what's happening around us. And so this new world is not about whether Mexico is the enemy of the US for labor, right? This new world is where robots have to play with humans, where artificial intelligence fits into the way that we execute, where we may have labor clouds, not just data clouds, where people put their virtual shingle in the cloud and they hire out 20 hours a week, might become full-time labor. What happens to society when we get to that point where we're not actually working 40 hours, right? How do we actually manage that kind of group? Like actually Richard Branson and the Virgin Group are actually hiring more people at 20 hours so that more people can be employed, right? When you have this world where we're managing our own careers, where it's competencies that matter, not 8 hours. It's I can actually do this task, and I can do it at this level of mastery. Those are the things we have to think about. And if actually the customers do more work, should we actually compensate them for that? You know, should they be part of the model, right? If they do 20% of the labor, maybe we give them actual loyalty points for that. We keep them closer. We create this virtual cloud capability that allows us to execute better. This new world that goes from the traditional to working in the coffee house. You know, the Gen Z actually don't understand the value of a manager. They don't understand the value of the organization. They feel like it actually violates what they stand for. And so they like the idea of a headset in a coffee house doing the work that they need to do. They don't mind doing the work, but not in the context of what happened over the past 100 years. And so we're going to have to think about that. And then it even gets crazier, because if you haven't met Pepper, any of you seen Pepper in person? It's very, very captivating. You know it's a robot, but he reacts very, very well, or she. And it's like, whoa, I like this. It can detect emotion. It can actually feel. You actually understand and have an interaction. And we're thinking that it's not about chatbots, right? Chatbots are a very primitive way of thinking about answering an FAQ. The digital employee allows you to interact naturally, just the way we would do right now. Not slowing down the language, not picking certain words, not doing it in one language particularly. And to do it where the work is completely handled from beginning to end. The task and the outcomes are managed by a digital employee. And that digital employee fitting within the context of the delivery model that you would have. And so we're suggesting, if you would take us up on it, right, that you might yourself create a job description for your first one. We call them Ziggy. Ziggy, the digital employee. Pretty fun here. This is how you want to hire them, right? So they're going to not ever ask for a raise. They only teach them once. Customers prefer them. They're always happy. They don't call in sick. They work 24/7 by 365. They don't charge overtime. They're never distracted. As a matter of fact, that might be the highest benefit, right? They don't have any drama going on in the hallways, right? They don't take bathroom breaks. Pretty interesting, right? I like that. The skills, they're skilled up to whatever you want them to be skilled in. I don't specifically have to hire, like I love that Spence has his master's degree in physics, but I could just pick someone and pick this digital employee and make them a master's in physics. Fluent in many languages. I learn all types of companies. I have a degree in everything. I get smarter all the time. I never go back to zero. Would you fire a digital employee? I've always sort of tried to figure this one out. I don't think you would, because they only get better over time. Maybe they're fussy, maybe they became a rogue, probably not. And then references, you know, I mean, they're probably pretty good at doing that for themselves. But we think that Ziggy is going to fit very nicely into the execution of the services that you would offer. So let's walk through a quick example of this. So meet Lee. She's searching on the web. She wants to buy a house. She's looking at Zillow.com, and while she's looking at Zillow, finds a house she likes, and up pops a little pop-up that says, hey, this is Galaxy Mortgage. Would you like to pre-qualify for a mortgage? We could do this over Facebook Messenger. And she's like, wow, this is pretty cool. So she starts typing, answers 5 or 6 questions. It's fantastic. That's simple. Like, looks like you probably pre-qualify, Lee. How about we connect you? Because there's some regulations where you need to talk to a person still. Why don't we connect you with Eva? And next thing you know, Eva is on the phone with you. Rings up. Great. Eva says, yeah, can you just give me your social security number and a couple other pieces of data, and we'll get this thing completed in no time. And 3 minutes later, Eva says, looks like you qualify, Lee. Why don't we do this? The next step is a little bit rote and mundane. I'm going to transfer you over to Ziggy. Ziggy's been working with us for a while. He's going to manage the process from here forward. So Ziggy takes over. Ziggy does the next 5 things that have to happen. You know, sort of like, did you get the title? Do you have your inspection done? Do you have insurance on the house? You know, all those pieces of stuff that needs to follow through, and you just like to get a message here. Once it happens, I get another text message or a Facebook Messenger message. The process is completed, and you get one more message that says, wow, looks like you're done. Would you like to talk to Eva again, or should I just put this in a package and ship it to your house digitally? You're like, you know what, listen, Ziggy, you've been doing such a great job. Why don't we just finish this out? And then next thing you know, Lee's happy. She got the house. She never had to really do anything. It's this integration of the digital employee with the human employee working together across a process that we could imagine any way we like. This is for you to build and have fun with. And as you do that, we've thought about this a bit because there's some level of comfort. Like maybe there's some questions you would like the digital employee to handle, and maybe there are some that you still want a human, right? I mean, we still believe that humans are better with empathy, although I'm not sure I've ever felt much empathy when I call up a contact center. But, you know, we would hope that there's something there one day for me when they say, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gagnon, that we've messed you up 7 times, but my expectations might be a bit high. So, but there's a scale, some scale. This is one example of it, you know, and we think that you could come up with your digital comfort level. Have it really high in one instance where you could decide that that human has to do just the high end of it, or you might say that's a little bit much for me, and you can bring it down. This can adjust as you see fit, as your digital employee becomes more integrated within the overall delivery experience. And for the practicality of this, we've been thinking about how this plays into our products. So over the next couple of days, we're going to talk to you about, I guess, Mike and I have been doing this, right? Workforce management, workforce optimization. Now it's workforce for experience, right? This is about the next generation of thinking, right? We got a couple light bulbs going on, thank you, GE. And we're thinking about how you're going to schedule differently. Like, so is one digital employee equal to 1,000 people or 2? What if the dynamics change and labor changes very quickly? And what if you have them doing something like, I don't know, taking pizza orders on Super Bowl Sunday where demand's really high? How would you schedule for that day with a digital employee in the middle of that? How many transactions will get processed? You have to have software that's going to allow you to dynamically respond to this. Workforce management, and then you're going to have to create maybe different kind of skill groups, right? This is new. We haven't really worked with this. What is that competency level? How does that get managed across the board? Quality. There is no sort of, as far as I could understand, there's no like speech recognition for a digital employee. We're not going to actually do voice analytics. So it's a very different way of thinking about quality. And in addition, as we start to bring customers in that sort of workforce in the cloud environment, how do we guarantee quality when it's a much more fluid execution model? We got performance. I mean, if you're working 24/7 by 365, what would you measure as performance? We're working on thinking about how we evolve our analytics so that we could actually help you think about this. And then lastly, that agent career. We actually think that the agent's going to get the best benefit out of doing this. For the first time, we'll treat them with respect. We'll put them on a career path. We'll ask them to take on additional responsibility. We'll ask them to be big thinkers, solve hard problems, learn and grow, build more competencies. It only gets better and better. I mean, imagine if you were an agent and all you ever did was answer the same conversation every time. And here now, it's exciting. We're no longer managing you with this idea of, you know, average talk or handle time. Like, that doesn't mean anything. So we evolve very quickly here, and you'll see this happen in our products over the next couple of years. So we've been pretty busy, and we learned a lot along the way. We talked about the agents not just having a job, but being on a career path. This is pretty interesting because if we look back even at what's happened at the Radisson Hotel Group, it's evolved how the entire labor force comes together in the hotel. I actually think this one might be the biggest of all. We've made a lot of promises to customers, and we've been mostly genuine about that. We're going to make you important, and then you don't feel important. This might be the first time where we can actually start to deliver on that. And the reason is because we can do it consistently, and we can just open the top off this, make it all 24/7 by 365. We're actually going to really understand what customer needs are. I mean, it's very hard in just a pure contact center environment to really know customer needs. I mean, we can sort of do a word map off of speech analytics and try and draw some inference from that. But imagine if every inquiry started off as a text, that we could actually really start to see what customers are asking us and really understand need. Fascinating what happens when you understand that. We have growth opportunity. Today, we actually, I mean, I won't steal thunder from David when he gets on stage with iSelect. Their massive opportunity at iSelect, right, is in increasing the amount of products that a customer can buy. But when all I'm doing is transactional stuff, I can't get to that. I don't have time. I want to spend time talking to you, understanding your needs, helping you think about what to do. And if I don't have that, and I don't have the competencies, I can't get there. But we know that growth happens when you hand the hard problem to someone who has the time to help you solve that. We said before that customer effort matters. I don't know about anyone in this room, but I would like to minimize customer effort. I feel often like what happens is you increase the effort for me. You make it harder. I don't know many examples. And you know, this is one of the things over your cocktails you should do tonight. Challenge each other, walk up to someone and say, hey, how do you minimize customer effort for your customers? We know that when you minimize customer effort, that actually volume increases. And then lastly, this Ziggy, your digital employee, in the beginning creates some conflict. It's good conflict, though, Because what it does is it starts to set a role in a place in the minds and hearts of the people who work there. They actually realize that this is how they're going to keep their job. This is how we're going to defend against the competitors who are coming after us. I mean, it's marvelous that GE is one of the few companies, only less than 1% ever make it over 100 years. If we were here 100 years from now, I think that number is going to just go down. Because there's too many who are trying to take what we have. The digital employee gives you the defense against the against the upstarts. That's really important. And what we've been doing, in addition to just learning, we're sharing. So if you haven't seen this site, some of the magicians on Aspect's team have built all this amazing content. We don't believe this content exists anywhere else. We would love for you to jump in and understand what kind of assets we have, what we've learned, and we share everything. We're more into sharing so that you can have the power of our content behind you. We also have Ivy that we announced, which is the ability to ask us questions using the NLU, Natural Language Understanding. And we're on this sort of magical journey. And so I sort of go back to the beginning, and I ask you sort of to walk out of this session and walk out of the next 3 days with the same mindset that I started in Sydney on the Harbor Bridge when I ran there with Kristen and the guys, which was that I wasn't going to not go do it because there was some risk that it might not happen. It was the belief in my heart that it would. I never considered that it couldn't. And so I just ask that you do the same. Because the risk of not going is I would never have had that experience. And I offer for the same for you, which is why don't you go and see if you can make it happen yourselves. Thank you very much.